Hello, friends. I want to begin with a confession. Every one of us in this room has been tempted to wait. Wait for more information. Wait for a guarantee. Wait for the perfect sign that tells us, yes, this is safe. Yes, you won't fail. Yes, the path is clear. But today, I want to tell you a truth that might feel a little uncomfortable. The most important chapters of your life will never come with a map. And that's exactly why this moment matters. Because what you hear today is not just a message. It's a choice. A choice between a life driven by fear of the unknown or a life shaped by trust in what you cannot yet see. One of those options keeps you comfortable, the other will change your life, and by the end of this speech, you'll know which one your soul has been waiting for. Faith invites courage before clarity, and that invitation usually arrives long before we feel prepared to accept it. There's something almost paradoxical about the way faith works. It asks us to make bold, life-altering decisions when we are standing in the foggiest parts of our story. It calls us to step forward when every instinct in us screams to hold back. And yet, if we look at the moments in our lives that shaped us the most, they weren't the ones where we had all the answers neatly lined up. They were the moments when we moved despite trembling hands and uncertain hearts. The truth is, clarity is comforting, it's clean, it's organized. It gives us the illusion that we are in control of the unfolding narrative. But clarity is often the result of movement, not the prerequisite for it. The world teaches us to wait until we know more, until circumstances stabilize, until we can see exactly how the path unfolds from beginning to end. Faith, however, disrupts that model. It asks us to act before the evidence arrives. It asks us to trust a story that hasn't revealed the ending yet. And that's uncomfortable because courage without clarity feels like stepping onto a bridge we can't fully see. What people rarely admit is that courage doesn't feel courageous while you're practicing it. It feels messy. It feels risky. It feels like every fiber in you is stretching to hold together a version of yourself that's growing faster than your confidence can keep up with. But almost every great feat of growth begins with a moment when someone decided to do the thing they weren't sure they could do. Courage grows in the uncomfortable space between I don't know how this will turn out, and I'm going to take the step anyway. And this is where faith becomes more than a concept. Faith becomes the quiet engine that powers courage. It fills the gap that information can't. When you walk into a new job, a new relationship, a new season of healing, or a difficult conversation, you don't get a detailed preview of how it will unfold. You walk in with nothing but your convictions and the hope that you won't fall apart in the process. Faith whispers that you don't need every piece of the plan to begin. You just need enough trust to move one step forward. It is tempting to believe that people who take bold leaps have access to some internal certainty the rest of us don't have. But in reality, the people who embody courage aren't fearless, they're simply willing to feel fear without letting it dictate the boundaries of their life. They have learned to tolerate the discomfort of uncertainty long enough to experience what's waiting on the other side. They understand that clarity often arrives in motion. Once you take the first step, the next one becomes visible. Waiting for certainty becomes a trap that keeps potential locked away. This keynote reminds us that courage before clarity isn't reckless, it's transformational. When we embrace that posture, we allow ourselves to grow into the very person who will know what to do next. Faith gives us the strength to act without perfect information. Instead of needing the entire staircase illuminated, we learn to climb one step at a time. And with each step, our perspective broadens, our understanding deepens, and our confidence roots itself in something more reliable than circumstances. There will always be unknowns. There will always be moments when the path disappears just beyond where we're standing. But faith teaches us that uncertainty does not mean danger. It simply means possibility. And courage, fueled by faith, is what allows us to explore that possibility long before we can fully see where it leads. Vulnerability as a pathway to trust is one of the most challenging truths we can embrace because it goes against everything we've been taught about strength, protection, and survival. We are conditioned to believe that the safest way to move through the world is with our armor unemotionally guarded, tightly composed, and always appearing in control. But when we choose to walk by faith, that armor becomes the greatest obstacle to genuine trust. Faith and vulnerability are intertwined because faith asks us to step into spaces where we cannot predict outcomes, and vulnerability is the courage to show up fully in those very spaces. Most people misunderstand vulnerability as fragility or weakness. Vulnerability is not falling apart. It is the willingness to be seen, fully seen, at the precise moment when the outcome is uncertain. It is the courage to say, I don't know how this will end, but I'm still choosing to participate. And faith thrives in that space. When you walk by sight alone, you depend on external proof, measurable results, and visible assurances before you risk anything. But when you walk by faith, you enter territory where proof hasn't arrived yet. Vulnerability becomes the act of opening your heart enough to trust what cannot yet be verified. Choosing vulnerability means we stop pretending we have everything figured out. It means we admit that we need guidance, connection, and support. And that honesty creates space for trust to grow. People often imagine trust as something that must be earned before we open up. But the truth is far more complex. Trust grows because we open up. Vulnerability is the soil in which trust takes root. Without vulnerability, without emotional visibility, trust becomes an empty expectation rather than a lived experience. Think about the relationships in your life that feel the strongest or the most meaningful. They didn't become that way because the other person was perfect, always confident, always composed. They became strong because someone dared to let their guard down. Someone said, "This is who I am," and someone else responded, "I'm here with you." That exchange is the essence of trust. It can't happen behind a shield. It can't happen when we're pretending to be invulnerable. It happens when we allow our humanity to be visible. Vulnerability also deepens trust within ourselves. When we refuse to be vulnerable, we disconnect from our own emotional truth. We silence our needs, bury our fears, and curate a version of ourselves that feels safe but is ultimately hollow. Faith invites us to reclaim our inner truth by acknowledging it rather than hiding from it. When you let yourself feel uncertainty, fear, love, hope, disappointment, or longing, you are not weakening your faith. You are strengthening your capacity to trust yourself through all of life's complexity. Vulnerability becomes the permission slip you give yourself to be real, and authenticity is the fuel of inner trust. Walking by faith means we recognize that vulnerability is not a liability. It's evidence that we are alive, engaged, and willing to grow. Vulnerability teaches us to lean into trust instead of control. It teaches us that we don't have to manipulate outcomes to be worthy of good things. When we open ourselves to the unknown, we create space for experiences that would otherwise be impossible. We create room for grace, for unexpected answers, for relationships that deepen us, and for opportunities that reshape our future. And perhaps the most powerful part of vulnerability is this: it makes connection possible. No one can truly connect with the version of you that hides behind certainty and perfection. Real connection happens when you allow someone, or something greater than yourself, to meet you in the spaces where you feel unsure. Faith grows not in the absence of vulnerability, but because of it. Every moment you choose to show up, imperfect and exposed, you strengthen the bridge of trust between your humanity and your hope. Letting go of the illusion of control is one of the most liberating and uncomfortable shifts we can make, because it requires us to confront the truth that most of what we cling to in life is rooted in fear, not security. We spend so much of our time constructing carefully organized plans, rigid expectations, and detailed predictions of how things should unfold, believing this structure will protect us from disappointment or chaos. But the more tightly we grip these expectations, the more we realize that control is something we chase, not something we actually possess. Faith challenges this illusion by asking us to loosen our grip long enough to discover that certainty is not a prerequisite for peace. Control feels safe because it gives us the impression that we can manage every variable. If we make the right decisions, avoid the wrong risks, anticipate every outcome, and minimize every threat, then maybe life will cooperate with our plans. But that's not how life works. Life is unpredictable. People change. Opportunities appear and disappear. Circumstances shift without warning, and no matter how organized or disciplined or intelligent we are, we cannot orchestrate every detail of our existence. Trying to do so only exhausts us. Faith invites us to stop exhausting ourselves and start trusting something greater than our limited perspective. When we cling to control, we often confuse it with responsibility. Responsibility is grounded, thoughtful, and rooted in wisdom. Control is rooted in anxiety. Responsibility says, I will do my part. Control says, I must manage everything, or everything will fall apart. Letting go of control doesn't mean abandoning intention or effort. It means releasing the pressure to engineer every outcome. It means recognizing that our worth is not tied to our ability to predict or prevent every twist in the road. Letting go also requires us to confront the fear that if we don't control everything, we might get hurt. And the truth is, vulnerability does open us to the possibility of hurt, but holding tightly to control opens us to the certainty of limitation. When we cling to control, we shrink our world to the size of what feels predictable. We reject opportunities that feel risky. We avoid relationships that require emotional exposure. We silence dreams that don't come with guarantees. In our attempt to protect ourselves, we end up imprisoning ourselves. Faith pushes us to expand instead of shrink, to risk instead of retreat. The irony of control is that the more we cling to it, the more anxious we become. Control doesn't soothe fear, it amplifies it, because deep down we know we cannot sustain the illusion. We know life is bigger than our plans and that unpredictability is inevitable. Faith steps in as the antidote to that anxiety. It teaches us that peace doesn't come from managing outcomes. It comes from trusting that we will be supported through those outcomes, whatever they are. Faith gives us the courage to stop treating uncertainty as a threat and start treating it as a space where growth can happen. When we let go of the illusion of control, we also create room for possibilities that exceed what we could have imagined. Control limits us to our own understanding. Faith allows us to be surprised. Some of the most meaningful relationships, opportunities, and breakthroughs in life arrive unplanned, unexpected, and completely outside the borders of our careful structures. When we stop forcing life to follow our script, we make space for a story that is richer and more expansive than the one we would have written alone. Letting go is not a passive process, it's a brave one. It's the decision to release what you cannot carry and trust that you don't have to hold the universe together for it to keep moving. Faith invites us to trade the exhausting pursuit of control for the grounded strength of surrender. And when we do, we begin to experience a freedom that control could never provide. Freedom to grow, to explore, to trust, and to live fully in the spaces where certainty cannot go. Resilience grows when we walk through uncertainty because uncertainty stretches us into versions of ourselves we would never discover in comfort. When life feels predictable, we rarely question our strength, our beliefs, or the foundations we stand on. But when the path becomes unclear and outcomes slip out of our control, something transformative happens. We learn what we're truly made of. We discover muscles of endurance, courage, and adaptability we didn't know we had. That growth doesn't come from clarity. It comes from navigating the fog, and faith becomes the anchor that keeps us steady while everything around us shifts. In moments of uncertainty, the instinctive reaction is often fear. The brain is wired to interpret the unknown as dangerous, even when the unknown holds opportunity or renewal. We try to find quick answers, grasp for control, or retreat to what feels familiar. But faith interrupts that cycle. Faith whispers that uncertainty is not an enemy to outrun, but an experience to move through. It tells us that discomfort is not a sign of failure, but an invitation to strengthen the core of who we are. When we choose to walk forward anyway, resilience takes root, not because the path gets easier, but because we grow stronger within it. Resilience is not a trait reserved for a certain kind of person. It's a capacity built through repeated encounters with the unknown. Each time we face something we cannot predict or guarantee, we have a choice: freeze, fear, or move. And each time we choose movement, even imperfect, trembling movement, we reinforce the belief that we can survive the uncertainty. We stop seeing challenges as proof that we are unprepared and begin seeing them as evidence that we are capable of learning, adapting, and evolving. With every step taken in faith, resilience expands quietly inside us. Walking through uncertainty also teaches us to release the false idea that resilience means being unaffected, unbothered, or unbreakable. True resilience is deeply human. It allows us to feel fear without being swallowed by it. It allows us to acknowledge doubt without being ruled by it. It allows us to struggle without losing sight of our direction. It is the strength that comes from remaining open even when life feels unpredictable. Faith nurtures that openness. It gives us permission to stay present, to stay honest, to stay connected, even when we don't know the outcome. One of the most powerful qualities of resilience is its ability to transform how we interpret our experiences. When we walk by sight alone, adversity looks like a threat, something to avoid, something that might break us. But when we walk by faith, adversity becomes something that can shape us. Challenges begin to reveal themselves as opportunities to deepen wisdom, sharpen character, and strengthen inner peace. Faith shifts our focus from "what if this goes wrong" to "what might this teach me?" That simple shift changes the entire way we move through uncertainty. Resilience also grows through the realization that we don't walk through uncertainty alone. Whether we lean on community, spiritual grounding, or a sense of purpose greater than ourselves, faith connects us to something steady. That connection reminds us that we are held, supported, and guided even when our circumstances feel unstable. It keeps us anchored when emotions rise and doubts flood in. When the wind of uncertainty feels strong enough to blow us off course, faith keeps us grounded long enough to take the next step. And perhaps one of the most transformative aspects of resilience is that it builds confidence, not the kind rooted in accomplishments or certainty, but the quiet confidence that comes from experience. When you've walked through uncertainty before and discovered that you survived, adapted, and grew, you begin to trust your ability to face the next unknown. Faith strengthens that trust. It reassures you that every step, even the shaky ones, is forming something solid and unshakable within you. And that is how resilience is built, not in the absence of uncertainty, but in the willingness to keep walking through it. Seeing with the heart rather than the eyes is an invitation to move beyond what is immediately visible and step into a deeper, more intuitive way of navigating life. What we see with our eyes is limited. Circumstances, obstacles, timelines, and the current state of things. Our sight can only measure what is, but the heart, our faith, our purpose, our inner compass, can perceive possibility long before it appears in the physical world. The heart sees what can be, what is becoming, and what is calling us forward. This is why walking by faith requires us to develop inner vision, not just rely on external evidence. The challenge is that the human mind is naturally drawn to what is tangible. We want proof, we want guarantees, we want to analyze every detail and confirm that a decision is safe before we take even the smallest step. But when we rely solely on sight, we confine ourselves to our current reality. We look at our resources, our history, our limitations, and assume they define our future. Faith asks us to look differently. It asks us to look inward, to listen to the quiet pull of purpose, the gentle whisper of conviction, the ache of dreams not yet fulfilled. That inner knowing often contradicts what we can see with our eyes, and that's why it requires courage to trust it. Seeing with the heart means believing in something before it manifests. It means trusting that a seed will become a tree long before you see even a sprout. It means holding onto the vision of who you are becoming even on days when you feel nothing like that person. When we walk by sight, we wait for external validation to confirm our direction. When we walk by faith, our direction is anchored in something deeper: our values, our calling, our connection to something bigger than ourselves. The heart sees beyond circumstances, beyond setbacks, beyond temporary seasons of hardship. It sees purpose where the eyes only see obstacles. This kind of inner vision is not naive. It does not ignore reality. Instead, it expands reality. It acknowledges what is true in the present moment, but refuses to let the present moment define what is possible. People who live by faith are not people who deny challenges. They simply refuse to let challenges dictate the final outcome. Their hearts hold a picture of the future that is stronger than the fears that arise along the way. Seeing with the heart also requires an honest relationship with ourselves. It requires us to slow down enough to hear what our intuition is saying. Often, we silence our inner knowing because it pushes us toward growth, and growth pushes us toward discomfort. But the heart often recognizes truth long before the mind can rationalize it. It knows when it's time to leave, time to begin, time to heal, time to risk, time to step out. The more we practice listening to that voice, the stronger and clearer it becomes. Another beautiful dimension of seeing with the heart is that it opens us to compassion. When you navigate the world with inner vision, you see people differently. You see past their behavior into their humanity. You see their wounds beneath their words. You see their potential beneath their mistakes. The heart sees depth the eyes often miss, and that depth allows us to connect more authentically with others and with ourselves. Walking by faith means valuing that inner sight even when others don't understand it. There will be moments when people cannot see what you see. They may question your decisions, your timing, or your vision. And that's okay. Faith doesn't require unanimous approval. It requires alignment between your heart and your steps. When you trust the inner vision that has been placed within you, you begin to move through life with purpose rather than panic. Each step becomes intentional, guided, and grounded. When we choose to see with the heart, we begin to witness a quiet unfolding. Doors open, strength appears, opportunities emerge, not because everything suddenly becomes easy, but because faith sharpens our inner sight. And when the heart leads, the path, even if unseen, becomes possible. Living a faith-led life in a doubt-shaped world requires a kind of courage that doesn't always look dramatic from the outside. It often looks like small daily choices to trust, to show up, to hope, to move, while the world around you constantly insists that only what is visible, measurable, and guaranteed is worth believing in. Doubt is woven into the culture we live in. We are encouraged to rely solely on logic, to demand proof before belief, and to equate uncertainty with danger. But a life shaped by faith invites us into a deeper rhythm, one where trust becomes an anchor rather than something we offer only when circumstances seem favorable. A doubt-shaped world pushes us toward caution. It tells us not to dream too big, not to risk too far, not to trust too deeply. It whispers that disappointment is inevitable and that the safest way to live is by shrinking our expectations. But a faith-led life challenges this mindset by expanding our capacity to hope even when conditions aren't perfect. Faith stretches us beyond what is familiar and encourages us to embrace the possibility of what could become. This doesn't mean ignoring reality. It means refusing to let doubt be the loudest voice in the room. One of the hardest parts about living by faith is that it often asks us to make decisions that don't make sense to other people. It asks us to follow convictions that cannot be explained with spreadsheets or timelines. It pushes us to walk toward things we feel called to, even when we don't yet have all the answers. Doubt will always ask for evidence. Faith asks for willingness. And in a world that idolizes certainty, willingness can feel radical, but the truth is that faith and doubt can coexist. People often imagine faith as a state of perfect confidence where fear never surfaces. In reality, faith is deeply intertwined with doubt. Doubt doesn't cancel faith. It creates the conditions where faith can grow. If everything were certain, faith would never be required. It is precisely because we live in a world full of unknowns that faith becomes a powerful force. It gives us a way to move forward when doubt is trying to hold us still. Living a faith-led life also means practicing trust on a daily basis, not just in the big, defining moments. It's in the small decisions, the ones that seem insignificant, where faith strengthens. When you choose to be kind instead of guarded, when you choose hope instead of cynicism, when you choose to take a step instead of waiting for perfect timing, you are practicing faith. These small acts accumulate and create a foundation strong enough to support you when larger storms arrive. A doubt-shaped world often encourages comparison, making it easy to doubt yourself when others seem more successful, more certain, or more equipped. Faith asks you to stay rooted in your own path. It asks you to trust that the timing and trajectory of your journey have purpose, even if they don't mirror anyone else's. Faith reminds you that you are guided, even when you can't see every detail of the map. Another important aspect of living by faith is the willingness to embrace imperfection. Doubt thrives on perfectionism. It tells you that unless you can get it exactly right, you shouldn't even try. Faith invites you to step forward imperfectly, to learn as you go, and to trust that growth happens through movement, not mastery. This shift is freeing. It relieves the pressure of needing to have everything figured out and replaces it with the grace to take one step at a time. A faith-led life also changes the way we interpret setbacks. In a doubt-driven mindset, setbacks feel like signs that we should stop, pull back, or give up. Faith reframes them as moments of redirection, refinement, or preparation. When you live by faith, challenges become part of the journey rather than disqualifiers. You begin to trust that even difficult seasons can carry purpose. Living a faith-led life in a world shaped by doubt means choosing to align your steps with what your heart knows rather than what your fear predicts. It means believing that something greater is guiding you, strengthening you, and unfolding around you even when evidence is incomplete. Doubt may be loud, but faith is steady. And in the quiet steadiness of faith, you find the courage to keep moving, keep believing, and keep becoming who you were created to be.